It is Sunday the 5th of the 10th, 2025. That means only one thing. It's race day and it's going to be chaos. Chat, we'll talk about what could happen into turn one. We'll talk about all the salient plots and narratives, the data points that you need to know to enrich your Singapore Grand Prix viewing pleasure. We'll talk about the last 24 hours. Is Mad Max back, or was he within reason, well within his right to talk about Lando and Norris jeopardising his chance at a pole? And again, a pole around Singapore, I mean, it's worth something, right? 1.5 seconds is the delta that you'll need to overtake around here. Ergo, it feels a little bit like Monaco. We'll talk about Sir Lewis Hamilton pandering for the circumstance that he once loved at Mercedes as far as their tyre warm-up process. What are we doing? Am I in a twilight zone? I thought Lewis Hamilton hated everything that Mercedes were doing in his final years with them. As far as their tyres, we'll talk about that and more. In the first instance, let's talk about Mad Max. Is Mad Max back? Did he lose his mind yesterday, or was he very pointed? Listen, let's argue both points. In the first instance, Mark Hughes has written an article and he said that Max was only hundredths going into that final couple of turns away from snatching the pole from George Russell. Another couple broadcasters, Channel 4 most worthy of mention, have said similar things, that Max was only hundredths away, and you don't know. It was Monaco a couple of years ago that Max could break late and do something. I'm not sure that's true, chat. I've gone back and I've looked at the numbers, and I don't think that's on. Could Max have done it? You bet your bottom dollar he could have, but was it the most likely probability? Bearing in mind Max was carrying a negative delta of 0.15 going into that final sector. I don't know. This wasn't Alonso's lap from Monaco. This was King George Russell in his pump. He barely made any mistakes all lap, was pushing to the end, leaving no lap time crumbs on the table. I'm not sure that's the most likely probability, but is Mad Max right to feel aggrieved because of Lando? Potentially. Why didn't Lando just get out the bloody way? He'd been told by his engineers that Max was coming. Now, Lando will say it was 2 seconds up the road. How much dirty air can there really be? Really? But surely he must realise that it's a distraction. Get out the way. Therefore, maybe it was scored, Douglas. Maybe this is more McLaren politics and shenanigans that we don't see. All the while, Zach Brown professes to be Mr. Sports Etiquette, that we want to do things the right way, that we operate within these very narrow parameters as far as our rules of engagement, and it's sports and gentlemanly conduct. And then they're doing things like this. I'm like, what is going on? Can you spell hypocrisy? And again, Martin Brundle's spoken to that, hasn't he? Over the past, in fact, before qualifying, Martin was like, you know what, over the past couple of races, the ascendancy of Max and the fact that RB21, that Pierre Vacher and Enrico Balbo have now fixed for it, brought themselves upgrades, new floor fairing, wing beam, rear wing, now brand new front wing. Have you seen the front wing, by the way? Perpendicular as far as its upper plate. Looks very extreme, but it's doing a job, and because of that, it feels like McLaren are scampering, right? Mistakes ad nauseum. Talk about them. I was just thinking, I wanted to put the context going into this Grand Prix because Oscar Piastri doesn't make mistakes. 44 race finishes back to back, 34 of them, the most recent of which points scoring. Record-breaking settings, Nelly. There's only one F1 driver in history that's been more metronomic as far as consecutive point-scoring finishes. He has a name, and his name is Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. But you know the stats already about Oscar and the first 9 races as versus the latest 8. It feels like the trend is your friend until there's a bend. 4 poles, 5 wins from Oscar over the first 9. 1 pole and 2 wins over the last 8. Trend is your friend, some say, until there's a bend. Is this me portending that Oscar's form is about to fall off the cliff? I'm not so sure. That would be premature, but something has happened, and correlation does not necessarily imply causation. But it seems like it's happened in the dying embers of the championship when all of a sudden Maximilian Verstappen and Red Bull are eroding, taking chunks out of McLaren's durable competitive advantage. He locked up at turn 14 and 13, 100%, and then found Lando. So go on, chicken and egg, Issa, is it not? Did Max lock up because of Lando? Or did he lock up because he was chasing a very brilliant lap from George Russell? I don't know. We'll never know ultimately. This is hypothetical. I feel like this is an F1 barbershop conversation, one that we'll be having ad infinitum, forever and eternity. I do expect Max to be in Lando's way, just 2 seconds going ahead. Forward for good measure. Lando will eat what he cooked for himself. So Flovey is talking to the fact that Max Verstappen said, you know what, we'll remember that. GP in his communication rolled Max up. He evoked Mad Max by saying, you've got to thank your friend for that, the fact that we missed out on the pole. That's what GP says, and Max trusts GP, so why check his maths? Trust but verify, some will say, as far as the veracity of information. But if GP said that, then of course Max is going to jump to the conclusion that Lando Norris potentially cost him chance of a victory by dint of pole. Of course Max is going to say that. And of course Max will say, we will remember that, insinuating that when Lando needs a bit of clear track, when he doesn't need himself some dirty air in the dying embers of a qualifying session, that Max Verstappen might find himself inconveniently positioned. And I don't hate it. Kept asking him the questions, didn't they, as well? The press and media. So keen to get a reaction out of Max. Oh, Max. Andrew Benson in the post-qualifying press conference. Tom Clarkson had already asked Maximilian Verstappen, what did you make? Did you think Lando impeded you sufficient to cost you the pole? Max was like, it would have been close, I don't know, but he didn't put a name on it. Andrew Benson of the BBC, for the avoidance of doubt, all F1 journos are created equally. Benson is one of the good-est ones. Benson said, could you put a name on that bullet, please, Max? And Max responded to that by saying, well, didn't we already say, Clarkson already said, Lando Norris. And then when they did the bloody 3-person interview, David Coulthard wanted him to put a name on it as well, didn't he? Who cost you the pole, Max? Tell us a name. Max looked at Oscar and he said, well, it wasn't Oscar, if we're talking papaya-coloured cars. I think this could be the end of a brilliant relationship, you know? I think this could be the start of something new. Beef between former friends, Maximilian Verstappen and Lando Norris. And then Lando goes and claps back, doesn't he? Lando's like, well, they're always moaning. These Red Bull bods. Max and Red Bull are always moaning all the while. I don't know, there's hypocrisy in there somehow, Lando. Every time Lando, again, I don't think Lando was in the wrong necessarily. He was far down the road, whatever. I don't think Max would have taken pole position 9 times out of 10, but you can never rule it outright. It's Max bloody Verstappen, for Pete's sake. For some say soon to be 5-time champion. I don't think Lando is in the wrong, but complaining, that's the one thing that you shouldn't accuse anybody of, Lando Norris, lest you wish to be called a hypocrite. Every single time I hear Lando Norris open his mouth, he's complaining about something, whether it's the car that's been brilliant, market leading all year, that all of a sudden he's going to have to become a driver because it's understeering, mercurial, but yet and still super quick. What's happening now, though, Lando, is that your competitive advantage has dwindled. You're going to have to drive the car, therefore, yeah, your rears might be blistering a bit, but nothing that hasn't been happening to Max Verstappen all bloody year. So who's complaining now? Lando Norris. Lando, you were the person that talked to Lewis Hamilton and said, you know what, if I have the quickest car, that's so easy. The only person I need to beat is my teammates. Next year, you said, would be your year at the end of 2024. So who is complaining now? I love a bit of beef as well. 225, Michael. Jeez. Go on then. Also, I want to talk about Lewis Hamilton very quickly before we preview the race that's due in a couple of hours. Look, Lewis Hamilton said a couple of things. He wasn't too pleased. And again, not a bad performance, because a woman scorned in Lewis Hamilton with all the Roscoe trauma. He's always going to be a very dangerous F1 peddler around Singapore. Lest we forget, 2018, one of the goatiest performances that you've ever seen. And again, 2018, that race weekend, Toto was like, where is Lewis? He rocked up late, but that is Lewis Hamilton. He does all of these goated things because of adverse circumstances, not despite. It's always been his way. Safak, we'll get to it, Safak, I promise. But Lewis Hamilton comes into the Grand Prix and nails Charles Leclerc around Singapore. He's faster than him, huh? Charles Leclerc, point to point, the quickest driver on the grid. And Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton, on the back of the week that he's just had, is quicker. Typical. And then he points his culpability lens at Scuderia Ferrari, saying, listen, we could have been even quicker, that we had a car capable potentially, if they could have sorted out the ride height, to go close to pole, but something happens with the tyres. What we want to do, therefore, is have a look at what Mercedes are doing, because I never experienced this nonsense at the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth. Interesting in that from Sir Lewis. I feel like this chap sometimes, I don't want to criticise him, it's the wrong time and wrong place, but I feel like Lewis has selective memory sometimes, because I remember last year when he was struggling, he was talking about the tyres and the tyres pressures. You remember he kept on making mistakes in sector 3 during qualifying. It's like the pace would just go away in the final couple of turns. He was like, something's going on with my engine and my tyre pressures and my tyre temps. You remember, it's not just me, I promise you. Lewis Hamilton definitely said that. So I'm not sure. There's a lot of things, lessons that Ferrari can take away from Mercedes as far as what good looks like. Processes, Six Sigma, agile working practices. I get it. But I'm not sure tyre prep as far as 2024 and 2023 before is one of them. It's going to get techie. Lewis was chatting to Susie Wolf after the F1 account. I didn't see it. Hey, the Lewis talks to everyone, doesn't he? He works the room very well, does Lewis Hamilton. Although, that being said, I'm not sure he's working the Ferrari room, sending all those memos. Sounds like some of those Ferrari engineers are desperate to have Carlos Sainz, their old mate, enter the Scuderia Ferrari fray again and drive the red car with the yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop. Go on, and let's talk about turn 1, because it is going to get techie. In fact, before that, let's talk about Williams. Disqualified and then not disqualified. Well, you can get disqualified from qualifying, but that just means you need to start at the back. What were they disqualified for? Well, 2021, Brazil. Do you remember Red Bull issued a protest about Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, saying that the DRS was a tad too wide, 85 millimeters. That's too much. And again, it's one of those rules and regs that you either, it's binary, it's black and white. Either you are compliant or you are not. And Williams were deemed to have a DRS that opened too wide. Mention no names. McLaren this time last year with their bloody cheeky slot gap that would enhance their DRS when it wasn't DRS enabled. James Vowles was none too happy. I don't know how this level of ineptitude happens, says Jimmy V. And this is a different game now, because Williams are experienced. They're enhorabuena, experiencing some positive momentum's underground. We'll get to it. Go on then, let's talk about the race. Singapore's going to get techie, I'm telling you. Listen, for the avoidance of doubt, got to learn from the mistakes of Christmas past. Lando and Norris last year, one stop, went from hards to mediums. That would be the modus operandi, the quickest way to get from A to B. But for the fact that at Singapore, they've increased the pit lane speed limit from 60 to 80, trying to throw into there more stakes and variables, trying to entice these drivers and teams to roll the dice on a cheeky two-stopper. Oh, and by the way, risk of safety car is high. There have been 15 Grand Prix around Singapore, and only one of them, 2024 last year, has not had a safety car circumstance. As far as the frequency of safety car around here, 15 races, there have been 24 safety car, and the majority of them happen between laps 30 and the start. So what do you think you're going to do then? What, do you start on softs and hope for an early safety car? And then I just don't know or mediums even. I don't know what's going to go on. Let's talk about turn 1 then. Max Verstappen is starting on the dirty side, and the run into T1 is only 177 metres. Max, if he gets a whiff of it, of course he will pull a dive bomb. Doesn't like George Russell. There is a begrudging respect. Max uncharacteristically spoke very highly, almost effusive in his praise of King George Russell's lap yesterday, and it was a god tier lap by the way. I feel like it's almost been missed. Watch the onboard of George Russell's lap. It is God tier. If you ever doubted that he deserved himself a multi-year contract on the back of his performance this season to date, then you only need go and watch the onboard. He's locked in. It looks like Max Verstappen, Saudi Arabia, sector 1, sector 2, leaves no tenths on the table. Full send, can barely put a hair's breadth between his wall, the outside wall of his tyres, and the wall proper. God tier levels of driving from King George Russell. But does that mean that George doesn't have himself a cheeky error, a mistake of the unforced variety around Singapore? You bet your bottom dollar he does. Every time he gets around there, he'll end up at some point during the race weekend yeeting it into the barrier. Of course he will. So of course he's got another mistake in him. The question is whether Max can induce that, bring it out of him potentially into turn 1. Max indeed, Safak, you're right, starting on the dirty side of the grid, as are all the even number starters, being Sir Lewis, Antonelli and Maximilian Verstappen. So it's going to get techie as well because it's only 177 metres. You've only got so much time to get something done going into turn 1. Haven't you? I don't like Russell, but the lappers. Jess, people are going to have to start putting some respect on his name. I'm telling you, if there's a chap capable of keeping Max Verstappen honest when he's had his Weetabix, he might have a name, and his name is King George Russell. He's not bad. I've been mightily impressed. Go on, let's do a cheeky George Russell loving for a second, because we give Max Verstappen his due flowers all the time. I think as far as George, look, the best way I can summarise it is listening to him in the press conference pre-race. He just knew everything. Do you know what I mean? He's very serious in his approach to racing and Formula One. More serious than I think anybody else on the grid. Not named Maximilian Verstappen. He went off into this soliloquy. I'll go and rewatch it, but he went off into this mad soliloquy where he was talking about last year in 2024, Scuderia Ferrari might have put it on pole, but for an incident in Q3. Who knows this? I tell you who doesn't know this. Lando wouldn't know that. Not off the top of the dome. George Russell goes and does his due diligence and he makes the appropriate, per Nico Rosberg, lifestyle choices. This is the dude that travels to Grand Prix with his blanket and his bloody pillow in his bag because he wants to optimise for his sleep. You know what I mean? This is the dude who isn't afraid of Max Verstappen in the way that a Lando Norris is. Cowers, runs away, tail between his legs. George's not doing that. He's a serious peddler. Now, you don't need to love him as a person. I understand that he rubs millions of F1 fans up the wall the wrong way. I get it. He is latte boy, orders his latte and says to the barista, any milk, whatever. Who does this? I don't get it. I don't understand his personality. But as far as his approach to F1 and racing, as far as his commitment to delivering upon his lifelong dream that is win a championship of the drivers of variety, he is that guy. You almost want to take his will and determination, his approach and commitment, and pair that with Lando Norris's natural ability and blitzkrieg pace, and then you've almost got the natural. You've got the driver there. But Shez told me this a couple weeks ago that I need to put some respect on George's name as far as his pace, that he might be one of the quickest after Charles and Max, that George might be right there as far as natural. I didn't think that he had it. But again, that makes you look at the relationship, the competitive relationship between Lewis and George over the past 3 years in a completely new light. Of course, Lewis wasn't going to get close to George. He's that quick. He's one of the fastest, definitely on the grid today, if not in history. That's what the F1 aficionados, the go-toest ones, have been saying to me, and I will defer to their expertise. Gio's not a bad peddler at all. Lando is a coward, Varland says. Geez, is Lando a coward? Is that too harsh a word? I'm not sure Lando is a cat. If we're being precise with our language, Peter said it's a Senna style lap. He did say it, didn't he? Yeah, George was on it. Look at sector. Go back and rewatch sector 1. If you can get if you can get some footage of the onboard, the way he hooks. Oh mate, it's chaos. The way George hooks up the right hander just before going left. uses all of the curb beautifully to assist him in optimizing for his lap time. Go on and let's talk about Lando's errata. I really don't want to rally on Lando because he's such a good driver. Said he was sick yesterday, said he'd been struggling, and Singapore was not the track around which you want to struggle, so hot and humid is it. But I just like, you weren't struggling through free practice. You know what I mean? He said that he was sicker in free practice than he was in qualifying. So why did your performance not go up? It went down. It's just frustrating, is Lando. It just frustrates the hell out of me. Now, Lando is still a boy. He's got that. Well, you say that, Jamie, but he's been in and around F1 for 7 years now. There is a difference. Look, I always say it to my son. My son will always ask me, can I have X, Daddy? There's a difference between can and may. Can is capability. And Lando doesn't lack for that. Of course he can do it. He could have put it on pole yesterday. Singapore is one of his tracks, his favourite ones. He was god tier around here last year, gapping the field, including Max Verstappen, to the tune of 20 seconds. Of course he had a quicker car. But yeah, and still that proves that Lando goes well around Singapore. If there is a track around which you would back Lando Norris to gap the rest of the field, notwithstanding the multitudinous foibles now apparently of the double brake-ditted McLaren MCL39, all of a sudden it's become a bad car. It would be Singapore. Lando's, he's a fast driver, but he's frustrating. He's Gaza as far as a football player, all the natural talent and ability. But I feel like when all is said and done, full stop, new paragraph on Lando Norris's career, I think it will be one of unfulfilled potential. Would you say George needs another team to reach his foot? No. B, he needs to stay at Mercedes now. He needs to get that contract. And Ted Kravitz said that they were going to potentially give him a new contract this morning. I'm waiting. The news has not yet broken. Ferrari just keeping the SH1T box pushers. I don't know why they changed it so much in the final year of a rule and reg spec. It makes no sense. Even George was sick in Baku and Oscar was sick in Spa, but they do it despite those things, right? Lando is just an excuse merchant at this point. Normally it's at the start of the race when he loses all the positions. Normally it's the first few laps. But now it's just Lando, it's so frustrating. Give me his gifts and let's see what I do then with a bit of industry and some elbow grease. Supposed to be announced today, 2+1, 100% Jess, but I've heard nothing yet and I've been checking my phone. Of course, I talk about George Russell's contract, the contract that he so deserves. It should be a 2-year contract, but of course, Toto's still flirting with the one that they call Maximilian Verstappen, as one might do. But I mean, if he's looking at yesterday's performance and the fact that earlier in the season in Equalish Machinery, George also gapped Max to the tune of 1.5 tenths. I don't know. George is Mr. PowerPoint, Mr. Saturday is putting together a very strong case for himself. Maybe he goes and wins the race today and then gets his multi-year contract offer. Dustin, I don't know, Miami. I can't even talk about Lando anymore. It makes me get too upset. Lando and Charles are very similar, fast dudes, but they keep making stupid mistakes even after all these years in Formula One. It's not World Championship material just yet, and I wonder if it ever will be, says Jamie. We're getting to that stage when we're going to have to start having that conversation now. How it's a difference now in extent. How long can they go for before their stories is one of potential, wasted potential? I don't know. A lot of the rookies did it yesterday. There were mistakes all over the shop, of course. But Lando and Charles are not rookies, is my issue. I mean, I say it out of love. I don't want to kick either one of them when they're down, but I want them to optimise for their not insubstantial potential. Is that me? Is that something wrong with me? Wanting for people to be and do their best, especially when they're as gifted as Charles and Lando, and then you see George just gapping it. I saw a picture with George and Charles and Lance when they were young, and even then George just had this uncanny look in his eye, like he's not come here to mess about Max versus George for 2026. Can you imagine, Safak? How about 2027, Safak, when they're both in the same car? Maybe go on, let's play hypothetical games for a second, because I can see this one coming on the horizon. If, imagine, The Mercedes build a car in 2027 with a god-tier power unit, purple sector's aero, purple sector's sustainable fuel as far as Petronas. Imagine a world where Mercedes are gapping the rest of the field, just like McLaren have been doing for the past 2 years maybe, or year and a half at least. Imagine then. And George Russell has himself a multi-year contract now. What's Max going to go and do? Max will back himself to beat George, as I would, but he's going to have to back himself to beat George in the same car with the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth, Mercedes under the helm of Toto Wolff. So imagine then 2027. People at Sky Sports keep trying to drudge up the beef between Lando and Oscar like there's something there. There is not anything there. And the F1 community is far too wise and savvy to buy such nonsense. You are trying to sell us Wolf tickets. This is not 1989 and Senna Prost. The beef and the friction just isn't there yet, nor perhaps will it ever be. But rest assured, in 2027, if we're talking Mercedes and George and Max, oh, the humanity. It will get techier than techie things. Charles and George still doesn't have the car cam. Lando doesn't have that excuse. Well, yeah, and this makes it even worse. Sid, if we're going to normalise for absolute terms performance in the car, this is Lando's easiest championship to win. You say that, Michael, but he had the championship. Will Buxton went on the Fast and the Curious podcast this time last year and said, I don't think Lando's going to win. I know he is now since he's come out and retracted that. Said I was lying and it was all kayfabe because I was working for F1. But I'm calling bull feathers on it. The F1 community is far, far too intelligent, far too savvy, far too grey of beard. They are not rookies, Issa. I agree with you. Go on then. Let me just tell you this is important. 177 metres into turn one, it's going to be chaos. That Oscar, since the summer break, Oscar was going gangbusters in the first 8 races. Since the summer break, however, there's one driver who scored more points than any other. He has a name, and his name is Maximilian Verstappen. 68 points since the summer break per at F1 Guy Dan. 40 points from George. Oscar has scored 40 points. Lando Norris, since the summer break, has scored 24 points. His form has just gone one of these, right? When he needed to dial it up, Lando Norris, he's been nowhere. Again, 177 metres only into turn one. The even number grid positions are starting on the dirty side of the grid. Ergo, that it's not rubbered in. It will be difficult to get traction and dial in the appropriate amount of RPM to nail a launch for Maximilian Verstappen, trying to get up the inside of one King George Russell into turn one. 1.5 seconds is how much delta advantage you will need around here to make an overtaking manoeuvre and stick it. It's Monaco. Really difficult. Therefore, you might want to be invested in strategy. Safety cars are plenty around here. There have been 15 races at this track since 2008 inception. Crash gate settings, Fernando Alonso. Since 2008, those 15 races, we've seen 24 race cars, safety cars even. 2008, the safety cars happened. Lap 14 and 34. 31 and 36 in 2010. Third 29, 33. So they all happen between lap 0 and lap 30 for the most part. Therefore, they will gauge and develop their strategies at that altar. It would be foolish not to. There will be a safety car. You can take that one to the bank if past his prologue. The only race where there hasn't been a safety car is 2024. Michael, you're a legend. Lando won't have cheetah car 2026. But we spoke to Dr. Robson. I think some of them still think something stodgy going on there. But the FIA deconstructed for all their brake ducts and didn't find anything, did they? If it passes all the rules and regs, all of the inspections, then what are we to say? Oscar's first moment of jeopardy in his whole career, and he's looked like blowing it. He's not doing... But he can afford to play defense, but that's exactly the thing that he said he wasn't going to do, isn't it? As far as Oscar, he said it's too early, 7 races to go. I need to keep winning. Will it be wet? Well, people are talking about potential rain, so who knows? The racing gods. Let me go to the forecast quickly. They've got that Andy here. The forecast. So the last time I saw a forecast, this is what it looked like. Sunday, 27 degrees Celsius to 33 degrees Celsius. Cloudy, therefore. There was another one here. per fastest pit stop, and they said on Sunday it could, but can you imagine if it's raining? Oh, the humanity. We will see in a couple of hours time where it will get techier than techie wing. Flexi wing suspension, flexi wing active suspension settings. Well, you've seen the front wing of the Red Bull car, Ray. Again, something that I've got handy somewhere. Here's the front wing. Check this out. I mean, do you want to be more perpendicular to the ground, Michael? Apparently that front wing has done something for Red Bull's ability to dial in the front end, give Maximilian Verstappen the handling dynamic from the car that he so needs and deserves, with a view to mitigate for the rate at which the tyres deg. It's all of a sudden an MCL 3.9. Ain't it rained F1 Academy? Look at this then. I pray Hamilton beats Leclerc from now. It could, well, I mean, he's got 40-something points to make up. Oh, the humanity. I'm nervous already, Miss RS. I'm going to run away for a little bit and go and do some more research. 11 a.m, bloody drivers parade. You can catch that on YouTube. We'll go live 30 minutes before lights out as per usual. It will get techier than techie things. 70% chance of wreck. Blimey, Derek. And humidity. Oh, the humidity, Sapphire. I cannot cope with it. 618 if you're watching concurrently. Do me a favour. If you like the stream, like the stream. Back in a couple of hours. T minus something. 30 minutes before lights out. Max Verstappen versus George Russell going into turn 1. How do you like your F1?